Oh, I played the long game. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. Throw away for obvious reasons. It's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my ass off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a straight-a title. For some, that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically, insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Straight-a titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property, shared block but freehold title. Only thing that was I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing. Didn't know him, but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord, of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem. I ask for a copy of the policy so I have a record. It gets sent through, and lo and behold, it's for straight insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title but a straight-a title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold. Emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being in absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that. He's looking out for himself, I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused, offered me 1K to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally and was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of a bitch, and I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private, saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5 to 6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale, for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this, our special day, and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country, the one he was on tour in, always signed Love, L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is not longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told, through said friends of friends, went along the lines of he would get weird gifts and flowers every year. Same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realized what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been balls deep, sans condom, in someone who wasn't his wife, only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful bitch. Cable company kept calling to recharge even after disconnecting service. Booked tech support to fix non-existent TV box. This is a repost. Earlier post on r/PettyRevenge got removed. Story is from 2021. My old TV finally broke down, so I got a new smart TV. Couple weeks later, I realized that no one in the family watches any TV channels. Everyone goes for streaming content. I decided that it's not worth it to pay for the TV connection anymore. Now, my TV connection is added into my phone plan along with my internet as well, so disconnecting it was not straightforward. It was a custom plan with its own dedicated relationship team. It took several calls to the team to find a resolution, which was to convert the TV connection to a prepaid one and then stop recharging. After the conversion was done, I got messages for a few weeks to recharge, and then finally a message to return the set-top box. I responded to that, and in a few days, the box was collected from my place. Good riddance. Or so I thought. Next started calls from random call centers for recharging. It felt different from the dedicated relationship team. I Googled and found out that this had become the practice in my country. The company had outsourced this part of the support to a third party, and they simply checked from the printed database about people who had a connection but did not recharge last month. Since my disconnection was in the middle of the month and their printed database was from the beginning, they did not have this updated info. I tried my best to inform them about this to no avail. I started talking to the callers, informing them of the fake problem my TV was having connecting to the set-top box and that multiple support requests have fallen on deaf ears. Also started recording the calls. Third caller took it seriously and booked tech support. Got a call from a field tech within hours. He came by. I greeted him with drinks and informed him about the real issue. We had a good laugh. He suggested that I keep it up a few more times for good measure. After 8 tech support visits, finally they got the message. Got a call from a supervisor asking why I was booking tech support when clearly I didn't have a connection anymore. I mailed him the call recordings. He was pretty annoyed, but I stopped getting calls so much. Any call I get now, rarely, like once a couple weeks, I just read from the same script, and if someone takes it seriously enough to try to book tech support, they get a short note against my ID to not bother this gentleman. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who is extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away. Before anything was put in writing, enter the new owners. The lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and, with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices and soared recently, and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It is pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt more smaller. Smell? My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smells like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 2 dozen rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped in front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission of course. Neighborhood X2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighborhood X3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbors set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Short for qualified advice, and a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after-party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greed bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who were saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my shitty manager. This is going to be a long one. Long distance relationship at the end. This could also go in Am I the Asshole? Sub. You guys decide. Names have been changed to keep anonymity. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I had excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device-specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat: perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared. Yet Bitz remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise we got a MS Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about Bitz from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bitz were the same person. I had been quite pissed with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bitz had been the bane of my, and several others, existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying "wrong number," I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. This is where I could be the AH. I also volunteered his manager's number, in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he had been taking loans in everyone's names: his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000, equivalent in USD, but it's a shitload of money where we are from. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later, haven't heard from him since. T-long distance relationship. Previous owner of my number had duped several financial institutions. He later turned out to be my shitty boss. I informed the banks of his new number and his manager's number, leaving his career in shambles.